Thank you for tuning in to This is Freedom. Every week we address topics and share teachings designed to encourage your personal growth and help you achieve freedom and victory in every area of life. Journey with us as our host, international author and speaker, Demontae Edmonds engages listeners with practical insights and deep truths that help change your life.
Greetings. I'm your host, Demontae Edmonds, and this is Freedom. And I'm excited to be with you again another week to share another impactful and life-changing message. We're looking forward to this session and to this empowering moment today because we have a very special guest. We have Tranae Southall of I Am Sober movement out of Atlanta, Georgia. And we're going to be discussing a topic that I believe is so relevant and so needed, and a topic that's often not discussed and often looked over. We will be discussing mental health for millennials. So Tranae, I would like to welcome you on to This is Freedom.
Thank you so much, Apostle Demontae. It is such an honor to be on this platform with you. I'm so excited to just engage with you and share about a topic that, as you said, is so very, very just not talked about, and we need to engage in. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I'm excited to unravel some things with you all today.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, when I saw an event, and we're going to talk about the event that you have coming up at the end of the broadcast, but I saw what you were doing. It just really pricked my heart and hit my heart that a lot of times, especially in ministry, I see people that's kind of reproducing the wheel and doing the same type of stuff. And the fact that it was unique, I knew that God really had placed it upon your heart and gave you a special assignment. So mental health for millennials, as I think about it, mental health is important for everyone, but let's talk a little bit why it's specifically important for millennials to understand mental health and mental well-being.
Wow. That is, oh my goodness, it's so important because I believe that this is such an hour that millennials are craving for answers. They're searching for answers, they're looking for discovery, trying to discover themselves. And we're looking for answers that cannot be found in history and science and religion and politics. It cannot be found in those superficial ideas, but it can only be found in the mysteries of God. And so what's so important about mental health is that in order for us to even engage in finding the answers that we are looking for, we've got to come to a place of stability in our mind so that God can have clear access to show us who we are as millennials, to show us our assignment, to show us what we have been placed on the earth to do. And when there are so many other outside and exterior voices and influences that take over our mind, take over our realities, we are unable to engage with the higher power that God has bestowed within us. And so I believe it's so important because it's not just about finding out who you are, but it's about discovering the potential that's locked on the inside of you, and then being able to stand in a place where you're able to help someone else, because that's what we're put on the earth to do. We have stories, we have journeys, but we've got to help someone else. And the only way that we can help someone else is by being an overcomer. Not saying that, yes, I've dealt with this, but when you dealt with it and after you've dealt with it, what did you do to overcome and to be successful with your results?
And, and I love that. And I think one thing about to be an overcomer, you have to know what it is that you're trying to overcome. Some people are struggling with depression. They're struggling with anxiety. They're just in a bad place. They're in a rut. They feel like, I'm in this pit, whether it's an emotional pit or just bad or negative life cycles. And I think when you really put your finger on, this is my issue, this is my trauma, this is my condition, this is where I'm at, then you can approach life and come to God and be real and start to deal with that. And then I believe that's the first step to becoming an overcomer. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. The first step is acknowledgement. As you said, you've got to acknowledge where you are. You've got to acknowledge what you're dealing with, and then not be afraid to confront your internal issues, your internal secrets, You've got to confront what's been dormant, what's been hiding, what you've masked over, because a lot of times what we don't deal with, it doesn't disappear. It grows with us and it becomes a part of our dysfunction that we mask as our character traits. And so we use this excuse of, oh, that's just who I am, or that's just how I was made. In reality, it's a dysfunction that has grown with you and has become a part of your distorted view or your distorted perception. And so, as you said, number one is you have to acknowledge. Number one, you have to confront the issue, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's mental illness, or whether it's rejection or even abandonment, because a lot of those things stem from something that happened in our childhood, whether it was rejection, abandonment, someone lying about you or betraying you. Those issues stem from a root of an issue. And so if we don't acknowledge and confront those root issues, we'll never come to a place of overcoming. Like you said, we'll never be able to overcome if we don't acknowledge what it is that we have to or dealing with.
Definitely. And, you spoke about childhood, and there are many people who believe that, hey, that was 15 years ago, 25 years ago, 40 years ago. And there's a saying that time is the healer of all wounds. I don't believe that's true. I've known people that's 60, 70 years old, and as I'm coaching them or ministering to them, things that happened when they were 7, when they were 8, when they were 15 comes up, and you can see this emotional upheaval. You can still see that it has psychological effect and impact on them, and they need healing. They need counseling. They need deliverance. They need God to show up and minister to their inner man. And so maybe there's some people right now that, especially millennials in their 20s, early 30s, that they've had traumatic childhoods. They've experienced some things in life that still affects them. What are some of the things they can do to get help or get on this path to just wholeness?
It's so powerful that you said that this myth of time heals all things. I don't believe that. I agree with you 100%. Time does not heal, but time only masks what's still there. And if the right pressure comes along or the right situation arises, as you said, there's going to be an uprising of something that's been dormant for so many years. And a lot of times it comes out in forms of outbursts or anger or issues that if the right person comes along or the right pressure is applied, it's going to come out. And so what I would say to the millennial today and what is necessary is that, as we talked about earlier, is confronting and then getting to a place or finding someone that you trust, whether it's a mentor or someone that you're accountable to, a prayer partner, finding someone that you trust that's not where you are, but that has been successful in journeying through life to help you see that this is what you're still dealing with so that you can be transparent. The Bible says to confess your sins one to another that ye may be healed. So the first step to healing and coming to a place of wholeness, because it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey. And so we have to, number one, acknowledge and confess and confront those things that we're dealing with. That's the first step, is this is what I deal with. This is who I am. This is what I struggle with. This is my secret. And I'm coming to a place where I no longer want to be partners with this illness. I don't want to be partners with this secret or this addiction. And the moment that we confess with our mouth that you are disengaging from the addiction or disengaging from the mental illness, the moment that you confess that, it gives you that much more power to begin the journey of healing. As I said, it doesn't happen overnight, but it takes a decision constantly, daily, that today I'm going to be transparent, number one, with myself. I'm going to be honest with who I am and where I am. And then I'm going to be transparent with my mentor or my leader or whoever it is that God puts in your path to be open with, so that you can begin the journey. And that person can keep you accountable. They can say, you know, I see you progressing, or I see you defaulting back to your old ways or back to your old perceptions or your old mentality. And then once we begin to confess with our mouth, we take on the responsibility of saying that this is where I am and this is where I no longer want to be. Then we can journey. And that sometimes it has to be coupled with practical action. So we have spiritual principalities or spiritual principles that we need, but it has to be coupled with practical actions as well.
I want to jump in right there, and I want to come back to that. But you hit so much meaty stuff that I want to kind of just interject so we can just stay in this vein of this. You mentioned being real with yourself. And, you know, one of the things I've learned dealing with people that have drug addictions and, you know, growing up, I had many friends that, you know, unfortunately used cocaine. Some of them used heroin, snorted heroin. That one thing with not only drug addicts, but even with the grief process, part of that road to recovery from addiction or even from grief is overcoming denial. Yes. Many people, you know, they can be breaking into houses, breaking into cars, and, you know, spending their entire check on drugs. And they say, I don't have a problem. I can quit anytime. But they're in a vicious cycle. Or, you know, when someone dies and the person gets the bad news that their uncle or their cousin or their brother passed away suddenly, at first it seems surreal. It's this denial. And so I think many people are in denial about their condition, their situation, where they're at, their brokenness. And they're trying to point the finger at this one or that one or the job or the money or Instagram. And they have to be true to themselves and say, listen, there's some things that I need to get healed. Can you just speak more to that?
Yes, it is so easy. We have social media, we have all these platforms. It is so easy to hide who we are and to hide what we're dealing with. And as you said, denial is the number one coping mechanism that we see, not just in millennials, but across the board, denying where we are and what we really deal with. Because when you have to step into a place where you're no longer denying or in a place of denial, it's terrifying to acknowledge and to realize that you really have a problem. It's very terrifying to acknowledge that I have an issue and I'm not ready to deal with it. And what I believe is that those who are still in denial are not ready to come to that place of wholeness and healing, because no one can want it for you. No one can want to see you in that place. You've got to want it for yourself. And it has to take a jolting on the inside of you, an awakening that you get tired of being tired. You get tired of blaming everyone else for your situation. You get tired of having on this mask, and you get to a point and you have to say, you know what, I have to come out of this place of denial. But that only can happen when the person is ready. And as we see, people who have addictions and drug abuse, they can stay in something for so long because they're in denial, but it's not until that person is ready that they can make the decision that I'm going to make the first step. At least I'm going to make the first step. And that's coming out of denial and acknowledging that I have a problem. No matter how much therapy, no matter how many people tell you you need to change and, you know, this is going to destroy your life, you have to want it as a person. And I believe that there's an internal awakening that happens, that sometimes it happens and we still ignore it. Yes. And we still stay in that place of denial, even though we know internally this is not where I should be, or internally I should be further than where I am, but we ignore it because it's easier. It's easier to be comfortable in your denial than the fear of the unknown. Because if you're talking about journeying to a place that you've never known, it's terrifying. And so it's more easier, especially for millennials, to stay in something that they know all too well, to stay in something that is familiar to them, something that they can control, versus coming out of denial and stepping into the unknown, stepping into the discovery of what you have not seen or experienced. And so not only is there denial, but there's a fear there that yes, if I leave this, or if I leave this coping mechanism, or if I leave this thing that has brought me comfort and made me numb and has been this person of ailment for me, or this person of healing, or this object of healing, if I leave this, what do I have left? What is there left to me? What am I going to discover? And so fear instantly comes in and takes over our ability to move beyond denial. And it's that yes, it's that awakening that has to take place. And then you have to be able to step out of fear. And no, it's easier said than done, but I'm telling you, it has to happen internally, where there is an awakening.
You know, fear, you know, oftentimes the very things that put people in these vicious cycles and bring issues with mental health are fear-based traumas, or traumas that produce fear. And so it's almost like fear it paralyzes people. It's also an open door, if you want to talk in the spiritual realm, for the enemy to come in to afflict emotional or spiritual abuse upon people. Now, I want to ask you this, because as I listen to you, I can just hear the fire. I can hear the passion. I mean, you are appointed, anointed to, I believe, reach people, especially millennials, and talk about what we're talking about today. And I think everything that you share is spot on, accurate, definitely what, you know, people's ears need to hear. But is there any personal challenges that you have had to overcome in your own life that's positioned you now to be able to speak to people and to reach back and grab them and pull them out of this emotional pit or this mental pit that they may be in?
Absolutely. And I'll just share a little bit of my story. As I mentioned, a little bit of my story. I have been attached. I'm a PK. In a sense, I grew up with my grandparents who raised me, who are pastors. So I was able to kind of experience that lifestyle, not PK directly, but I was able to experience that lifestyle. Grew up with my grandparents. Been in church all of my life, and I've been surrounded by leaders all of my life. I've served as an armor bearer. I've served as an assistant and all of those things in ministry. And my greatest pain and my greatest hurt and detriment has come from leaders who are well-known, leaders who are not well-known. That has been my greatest issue. And I've been even mentally abused. I've been physically abused and verbally and even sexually abused by leaders. And so when I tell you my story is very unorthodox, I've tried to commit suicide several times. One time I overdosed on drugs, and not even drugs, but I overdosed on pain medicine, a painkiller. And I ended up just taking the whole bottle. It didn't do anything. I think I got sick and I slept for several days, but the effect that I wanted to leave the world. The effect that I wanted, it did not happen. And then I also tried to commit suicide, even in 2018. And so depression runs in my family. It is a generational curse, depression and anxiety, and even coping with medicine. So growing up, I experienced a lot of my family depending on, painkillers and drugs and antidepressants, so much to the point where I grew up as a young girl making vows to myself that I would never take medicine, that I would never depend on this. And even to this day, I'm very organic with it when it comes to medicine. I try not to take it because that impression was left on me as a little girl, that my family and some of my family members battled so much with depression and anxiety. So it is not just something that I have seen externally, but it's something that I have experienced, trying to commit suicide, dealing with depression and anxiety, and being so depressed that I had no idea whether or not I was coming or going. And it wasn't until that awakening that happened in me that I said, I'm tired of being depressed. I'm tired of this negative perception that I have on life. And it stemmed from a root of rejection and fear, because my father wasn't in my life. So there was a root issue that I had to deal with, that, my father wasn't there. And I grew up with grandparents who were successfully married, but my father wasn't there. And so I grew up with a complex. I grew up with all of these issues and these mind games that plagued in my mind as a young girl, not believing that I was worth it, not believing that I was worthy of love. And so I grew up with these misconceptions that God had to break down. And it didn't happen until he connected me with my mentor that said, listen, you're great, you're talented, you're gifted, but you have an issue. And I'm going to sit you down and silence your voice so that I can get you to a place of healing where you can stand on your own. So it wasn't until my own desire to be healed, coupled with my mentor to help me and to sit me down and to journey with me, not just spiritually, but I remember there was a practice that she had me to. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to jump in here. First of all, when I heard about the leaders that I want to say take advantage of you and took indecent liberties, whether physically or verbally, not that I'm them, but I want to apologize because it just hurts my heart to hear that. There's some great leaders out here. Their hands are clean, hearts are clean, but some of these, I want to call them bad apples. They make it bad for other leaders. They make it bad for people seeking refuge and seeking deliverance. And several of my friends and some of my spiritual daughters have been abused by leaders. Even some young men been abused by male leaders. And I think it creates almost a mistrust of authority figures. And so the very people, when you look at a counselor, you look at a psychologist, you look at a doctor, you look at a policeman, you look at a pastor or a bishop, those are all authority figures. And so I think when you have that type of, I want to say betrayal, because there's a great betrayal of trust and boundaries, it creates this distrust of authority figures. And so now some people may know they need help, but they can't even trust who to go to. Who can I trust to go to that's an authority figure that can speak in my life that's not going to make things worse for me? So they stay in this kind of cycle. And so when you talked about your mentor, and I don't know who your mentor is, but kudos to them because they did one of the most powerful things. They said they're going to silence your voice, not to take your voice away from you, but to really not take advantage of what other gifts you had or what other talents you had, and really focus on you as a person. And so I think everyone needs you know, that one or two people in their life that can help walk them out of whatever season of darkness they're in into a place of liberty and victory. So go ahead. I'm with you. I'm listening. I'm enjoying this. And I know the listeners are being blessed as well.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you brought that point out, because as you said, leaders that you trust, that is one of the other things that prevents people from coming or getting to a place of mental wholeness and healing, because you don't trust. And that is something that I had to overcome, and I didn't even realize it. When I found my mentor, and when she decided that, yes, I see your potential and your greatness, but I'm going to sit you down, just like you said, not to silence my voice, but to shut me down for a season of healing, of repair, of recovery. And she was courageous enough to do that. And I had to learn how to trust again. And I didn't, I'm like, oh, in denial. I don't have trust issues. I don't have a problem with leaders, but I did. And it was so hidden and it was so buried that I didn't even recognize it. It took someone else to recognize that for me and to say that I'm willing to fight for you. I'm willing to walk you through this journey, but you've got to trust me enough to bring you to a place of healing. And so I'm so glad you brought that out, because it's so sad that leaders, and not all of them, there are some amazing leaders, but it's sad that a lot of millennials have that same story that I have, that they have been abused by leaders, and it's unfortunate. And so that's why I'm so passionate about being that one that says, even though we've been abused by leaders, all leaders are not bad. And there are some who are God ordained, who have the heart of God, and they're willing to sit you down. They're not impressed by your charismatic abilities, and they're willing to say, listen, I want to see you whole. I want to see you significantly mature, not just in your gift to speak or to preach and all of that, but to be sound internally. And so it is so important, as you said, that even when you do find that person, because sometimes we may have that person before us and we don't have the ability to trust, or we don't want to trust. And so that's when you have to step into creating a relationship with God, and getting into that place where you say, Father, I know that I need help. I know that I need healing, but I'm afraid to trust again. I'm afraid to put my life on the line for the sake of being healed. Yes. And I believe that when you genuinely, invite God into your healing process, not only will he lead you into the proper hands, even though you may have been mishandled, he will lead you into the proper hands that will genuinely want to see you healed. And then he'll create that bond, and there will be, the more you pour out, he's healing you on the inside. There's an exchange that happens when you trust someone to walk you through healing, that as you're trusting that person who is being led of God, there is an exchange that God the Father is doing, because he's the greatest healer. And yes, he uses men and women of God as instruments to orchestrate what he's doing. But ultimately, he is the one internally, mentally, psychologically, that is that internal, invisible healer that no man could ever do or touch. And so as you make that exchange with trusting someone, then God comes in and he does the work that man cannot do.
Yes. And so I want to just talk about this. If you could just tap into these two things. I believe in the spiritual. I am a servant of God, and, all the signs, wonders, deliverance, prophetic, all of that. I'm down for that. We do that. But I also believe in the practical. I had a young man that he was a minister, quote unquote, himself. He came to me, and he was telling me about his heart was broken because of fallout with an authority figure, which was another male. And as he's talking, the Lord is showing me there's more to it. Come to find out, he tells me they've been in a, 5-year, now this is a young man and this is an older man I'm talking about. They've been like in a 5-year affair, and this man kind of preyed on him emotionally, and, this physical stuff happened that's ungodly. And so anyway, as we begin to talk, I said, I can pray for you. I can speak into your life. I can pray for deliverance, for these demonic doors that have been opened. But I said, I want you to really go to a therapist. I want you to go to a psychologist. And I directed him, as well as me talking to him and trying to encourage him and trying to speak into his life, I directed him to sign up for a spirit field. Now, note I said spirit field, because some psychologists and psychiatrists, they may be dabbling in New Age or dabbling in witchcraft. You just don't know. So I directed him to a Christian psychology center. And he went, and I believe he went to 2 sessions. I wish he would have continued on with that. Well, especially for a lot of millennials and for African Americans.
Yes.
We don't like to go to therapy or counseling, or, I've seen it in other ethnic groups where they quickly go to therapy. They quickly go to a psychologist. But for African Americans, and especially for young people, many times we don't see the value of it, but I believe it's invaluable.
Oh my goodness. I agree with you. The practical action is so important. And I was doing some research some weeks ago as I'm preparing for my mental health symposium, but 85% of millennials deal with mental health, mental issues, trauma. And then 85% of those millennials don't want to go for help. They don't want to seek counseling. And then 90%, now we're talking about African Americans, have issues and they also refuse counseling because of this stigma or this myth that if you go to counseling or if you have a therapist, that it's just not, we shun the idea of therapy and counseling. And I think that is the most terrible thing that we can offer to our generation, is that misconception, because
Yes.
counseling is necessary. Therapy is necessary. Yes, we have the spiritual principles of God and we have his word. But at the end of the day, there's also going to be someone that needs to teach you how to apply these spiritual principles. Because as many sciences that we have today, a lot of psychology, the foundation that they come from is the word of God. And they kind of change it up and,
Yes.
make it their own. But a lot of our studies today come from the foundation of the word. The principles come from the word. And so it is so necessary. I believe in it, that if you need a counselor and if you have experienced traumatic experiences that have scarred you for life, it is so necessary. It doesn't take anything away from who you are or who you're becoming to have a therapist or a counselor, because what they're going to do is bring balance to what you're learning. They're going to give you balance on how to apply these practical actions so that in your everyday life, you are not defeated. We can preach and we can prophesy, as you said, and lay hands, but there is a responsibility to do the work necessary, which is the practical actions, to do the work that is necessary to get the best results. It's just like,
Yes.
a personal trainer, having a personal trainer, they can prepare a meal for you and have your workouts cut out for you. And if you're just doing the workout and not doing the eating, you're not going to get the maximum results. But
That's
if you
right.
couple the workout coupled with the eating properly, you're going to see the maximum results that's going to change your life. And so it's the same thing in this arena of mental health and traumatic experiences. The only way that you're going to see the maximum result of journeying to healing and wholeness is that you couple the spiritual principles with practical actions.
Definitely, definitely. And I wholeheartedly agree. And I've done that, going to the gym and not eating right. And it's almost counterproductive. So listen,
Yes.
you share so much. I appreciate you so much. And, we were able to hear your heart. And I believe a lot of people are going to be not only encouraged, but inspired to take the proper steps to wholeness and to, making sure that their mental well-being is where God wants it to be and where it needs to be for them to fulfill their destiny. Now, before we close, I want to actually just take a few minutes. If we can just take a good 2 minutes or 3 minutes, share with us about an event that you have coming up in Atlanta, Georgia. You can give some details about it, but you have a mental health symposium under I Am Sober movement. Just tell the people about it and let them know how they can plug into that.
Yes. So again, as you stated earlier, I am Lady Tranae, the owner, founder of I Am Sober Movement. We are going to be hosting a 2021 Millennial Mental Health Symposium, March 26th, which is a Friday evening, 6 p.m. in Alpharetta, Georgia. This mental health symposium is going to be such an amazing experience where you're going to have resources from psychologists, therapists who have studied in the field for several years, those who have been successful in ministry and marketplace and in business. And we're going to talk about those things that have not been talked about. We're going to unravel and discover the greatest potentials of mental health and healing and why it is so important, especially for the millennials today. We see a lot of our generals, a lot of our patriarchs and matriarchs that are leaving the scene, and God is raising up the next generation of leaders. And we have to be prepared for the warfare. We have to be prepared for what is happening in the world today. And it starts with a mental health, a mental healing. It starts with that. And so I'm so excited. It is a $50 registration fee. You also will be getting a copy of my latest release, my prophetic journal. It's called the Hidden Release Journal, which is a journal that is filled with 100 of my own very personal quotes and inspirational nuggets that I have put in and gathered over the years. So not only are you a part of the mental health symposium, but you're also going to receive a personal copy of my journal that I just released this year. And so I'm so excited that it's taking place. It will be happening in Atlanta, Georgia, March 26th. 6 p.m. If you want to follow me, I am on Facebook and Instagram under Lady Tranae.
Okay, thank you so much. You heard it, guys. Lady Tranae, I Am Sober Movement. Check it out. Plug into that. I'm your host, Demontae Edmonds. Thank you for tuning in again as well. Follow our social media pages at Demontae TV, DEMONTAE TV. That's DEMONTAE TV. Almost forgot my name. You can do it on Instagram, Facebook. Also put in Demontae TV on YouTube. We have a new YouTube channel as well. And then tune in through Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, all the places that you know to catch us on the podcast and on TV highways in Atlanta. So blessings to all, and we look forward to being back with you again.
Thank you again for tuning into This is Freedom with your host, Demontae Edmonds. We pray you have been inspired on your personal journey to freedom and victory in every area of life. Please tune in weekly for more empowering and inspiring episodes. If you would like to support this broadcast, please Cash App $D, Also, we encourage you to visit our website, www.demontaetv.com, for more information and resources. Follow the show's host, Demontae, on Instagram at Demontae TV.